Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Fields. So essentially, I've been putting out videos that really address three categories that are super important to weight loss. One are videos that have to do with motivation and essentially inspiring you. Two, videos that have to do with mental training. And three, videos that try to teach you very important behavioral strategies, essentially weight loss tips. And so this video falls into that category. This video is going to go over lifestyle change strategy number 5. Basically, this lifestyle change is really going to include two types of behavioral changes. The first one has to do with really limiting our food consumption after 7 o'clock. I think you've probably heard me say before, I hate rules. In fact, if you give yourself a rule, there is this teenager inside of you who is just waiting to rebel. Language, as I've spoke about in the past, is super, super important. Neurolinguistics has taught us that. So it's almost as if you say the word rule and your brain says, it's time to fight. So don't ever give yourself rules. And it's not, this semantics game between rules and guidelines. Rules are inflexible. Guidelines are flexible. We have this tendency to engage in black or white thinking, and there's so many other inflexible aspects of our thinking. We don't need to add any more. So look at this as a guideline. The guideline is around 7 o'clock. Why? Because after 7 o'clock, the body really starts preparing for sleep, and your metabolism really starts slowing down. After 7 o'clock, it starts slowing down more and more and more, so that 8 o'clock, it's slowing down more, 9 o'clock, it's slowing down more, and it does this to prepare us for sleep. We can't go to sleep when our metabolism is revving. And here's another benefit of not eating after 7 o'clock. If you eat after 7 o'clock, whenever our body is engaged in the digestive process, that's going to actually ramp up our metabolism a little bit. It's basically why so many people purport this idea of having many multiple meals or many smaller meals so that you get this benefit. That benefit is negligible in my opinion. But in terms of eating after 7 o'clock, not only is it not a good idea because your body's metabolism is slowing down and you're more likely to store that food as fat, but it also will interfere with your sleep, because when you eat, your metabolism revs up a little bit to digest that meal, and that makes the environment less conducive for sleep. We already have so many distractions, i.e. our cell phone, that make it very difficult to get a restful night's sleep. The last thing we want to do is have our metabolism revved up as well. It's also the reason why you should never exercise, or I shouldn't say never. You should try not to exercise too close to your bedtime, because again, that will rev up your metabolism as well. So I think the 7 o'clock guideline is really good for eating and exercise. Try not to exercise or eat after that. Now, of course, if you're contemplating doing some kind of exercise program and the only time you could do it is after 7 o'clock, and so it's this kind of decision, either I do it, but it's got to be after 7 o'clock, or I don't do it, then do it. Again, these are guidelines, right? This one change, not eating after 7 o'clock, can be so, so important for you for weight loss. I can't tell you how many people that I've met, including myself, who frequently used to eat well after 7 o'clock. You're talking about 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, having these. And the other thing too is how often are these meals unhealthy, right? So that's the other thing too. In the spirit of harm reduction, which is a philosophy that I espouse and utilize for working with people with addictions, talking about substance use disorders and that kind of thing. If you are going to eat after 7 o'clock and you really need a snack, try to have a snack that's mostly protein. If it's carbs or fat, there's a greater likelihood that it's going to get stored as fat, especially if it's unhealthy fat. And again, look at this at, in terms of degrees, right? So like after 7 o'clock is not great, right? But after 8 o'clock is worse. And after 9 o'clock is even worse than that. So if you're frequently eating at 10 o'clock at night, having a snack, and you can move that back till 9 o'clock, that's improvement. 8 o'clock, even better. Before 7, now we're talking. This change is super, super important. Okay. This other strategy, I think, really kind of fits well with this, and that is carb tapering, carbohydrate tapering. What does that mean? That means we have our very carbohydrate-rich meals in the morning, and then we progressively take away some of those carbohydrates throughout the rest of the day. Or what I mean is, then each subsequent meal that we have, whether it be a snack or a regular kind of meal like lunch or dinner, we reduce the amount of carbohydrates in those meals, and we keep doing that until we get to the end of the day. So that breakfast is going to be the largest amount of carbohydrates that we consume for the day. Lunch will be a moderate amount. And then dinner, we really try not to have any starchy carbohydrates. So what would that look like? Well, in the morning, you'd have cold cereal or oatmeal or pancakes or French toast or stuff like that, which breakfast food tends to be heavy in carbohydrates. And there's a reason for that, because we want that energy. And we have all day long to really utilize that carbohydrate as fuel rather than storing it. Then lunch could be something like a wrap, because wraps usually are not too heavy in carbohydrates compared to like hero bread, something of that nature, right? Or you can have, of course, a salad with, big croutons, and some other kinds of carbohydrates thrown in there. And, that would constitute your lunch. Probably a salad with croutons and even some of those French onions, not going too crazy with them because they're heavy in fat, probably would be a little bit too light for carbohydrates. So I'm thinking more for lunch, like a wrap or something like that, or, a bread that maybe is thin sliced, not like chunky, like a hero bread, or, that really puffy kind of rolls or bagels or anything like that. Maybe a thin kind of bread, like a flat bread, something of that nature. That's not too heavy in carbs. And, there's a lot of kinds of breads you can buy now that are lower in carbohydrate. So that would be lunch. Other ideas for lunches, I'm thinking sandwiches. It doesn't always have to be sandwiches. You could have like, a half of a sweet potato or half of a potato and some kind of meat and vegetables or something like that. Then when you get to dinner, you're going to really try to avoid any kind of starchy carbohydrates. So that means try not to eat any breads, try not to eat pasta, try not to eat potatoes, try not to eat noodles or rice or anything like that, and try to stick as best as you can. Again, these are guidelines to protein and vegetables or protein and fruit, because fruit and vegetables, while they are technically a carbohydrate, they're not a starchy carbohydrate, and our body will, use them because they are so nutrient dense for a lot of our various physiological functions rather than store them. Our body will tend not to store fruits and vegetables because they're not made for storage as well as, let's say, potatoes and pasta and that kind of thing. So as you can see, like every macronutrient has its purpose, right? But if we set up our day where we're relying on macronutrients at the best possible or most ideal times, like, yeah, starchy carbs are great in the morning because they give us energy for the whole day. When we have to work a whole day or take care of our kids or do things like that, let's have a big carbohydrate meal for breakfast. And if you're running a marathon, then certainly have a big carbohydrate dinner the night before the marathon. Most of us are not preparing for marathons, so therefore the heavy carbohydrate meal will be for breakfast. And then lunch, like kind of look at it like a 50-50 kind of thing. Like there's some starchy carbs, but not too much, right? And then dinner, we're really trying to get rid of them. Now, some of you may be saying, you said before that macronutrients are not that important, that the most important thing is being in a deficit. And now you're saying that macronutrients are important. So just to clarify this, the deficit is the most important thing. You cannot lose weight without being in a deficit. But these tips and strategies are designed to give you more bang for your buck, so to speak, right? So to get the most out of your efforts, then sure, certain strategies that, set meal plans up in a way that idealize these macronutrients, right? That use them in the most efficient, effective manner. Certainly, if you can do that, why not? Absolutely, right? Having carbohydrates, this is not to say carbohydrates are the enemy or anything like that. Absolutely not. It's a more strategic way of consuming carbohydrates. And certainly, you can have your starchy carbs for dinner and lunch and everything else. Absolutely. And if you're in a deficit, you're definitely going to lose weight. But if you want a tip that will maximize your weight loss efforts, this is one of those tips. And I would prorate these in the sense that trying not to eat after 7 o'clock is the most important. This is just another strategy that I think works well with that in terms of timing your meals that I think can be really, really powerful. So if you're not eating starchy carbohydrates late in the day, there's less of a tendency for them to be stored. And protein and, those non-starchy kinds of carbohydrates like vegetables and fruits and things of that nature, they also tend not to get stored as fat. So that's why, we try to incorporate them more into our last meal of the day, which usually is dinner. If you have a snack after dinner, really try again to stick to protein and fats, and healthy fats if you can. The reason why I say protein and fats is because it's really hard to find protein-rich foods that don't have some fat content in them. Now, of course, you could always do a whey protein shake, and that would be the best kind of snack you could have late at night. But if that's not so appealing, and I understand, then try to, just have a protein-rich snack towards the end of the day, after dinner if you must. Okay, these are tips, they're not rules. They're just strategies that can help you get the most out of your weight loss efforts. I'll have more at a later time. This is Dr. Fields.